Thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. Steve Hassan, and this was a very spontaneous decision to do a live stream today because a friend, Joyce Pavo, who is very close with Betty Jean Lifton, Robert Lifton's wife, sent me the New York Times obituary that Robert J. Lifton passed away yesterday. And so for many of my listeners, what a profound influence Robert J. Lifton was on my personal and professional life. And I just thought it would be honoring his memory. I've asked my people, Spike and Cami, to put together a playlist on my YouTube channel, Dr. Steven Hassan, of a number of interviews and links to blogs that I've done about Dr. Lifton over the years. And for those of you who are just kind of new to me, haven't read Combating Cult Mind Control or Freedom of Mind or Cult of Trump, I just want to start by saying um, I was radically altered by the Moonies in 1974, February. I was a student at Queens College. I was a creative writing major, and my girlfriend abruptly dumped me, and I was sitting in the cafeteria at Queens College, and I was deceptively recruited by a number of Moonie women who claimed to be students, and they weren't. They claimed not to be part of a religious group, and they just lied, and within a few weeks, I was believing the Messiah was coming to Earth, was going to save Earth from its many problems, and was adopted into this pseudo fascist religious cult known as the Moonies. Uh, and I spent 2.5 years in the cult, working 18 to 21 hours a day, 7 days a week for no pay. I was selected by Takeru Kamiyama within the first few months to be one of his American disciples, which got me access to Sun-Myung Moon directly. Moon didn't like Neil Salonen and the national headquarters in the DC area, so he moved it up to New York. And I was to be the internal able, which is cult speak, for I was supposed to be his spiritual superior to the president of the Moonies of the US. And I was groomed to take over the world for Moon. Back in the 70s, I was privy to these plans to infiltrate the US Congress and to lobby and to Moon said that democracy was satanic and we need a theocracy. And he said, when we take power in America, we'll amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense if people break our rules, which in my twisted Mooney pseudo identity made all the sense in the world because I believed Moon was sinless and perfect, and that's the ideology underlying the whole mass weddings that the Moonies would do. Truly a right-wing fascist cult. I had no idea what was really behind it. But when I nearly died in a van crash in 1976, and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks away from the cult, the famous story, and I tell it in chapter 2 of Combating, I reached out to my sister Thea, who is the only person in my family and friends who didn't say I was in a cult and I was brainwashed. So I thought she was the least evil of all, and I was always very close with Thea. And told her I was in the hospital, and she told me she wanted to take care of me and I should visit, and she wanted her son to know his Uncle Stevie. It led to my deprogramming. It's a longer story than I want to share today, but the key point that I want to get to is that when I was confronted by my father and my family about my involvement, I said, I'm not in a cult, I'm not brainwashed, I'm very intelligent, I know exactly what I'm doing. And my father cried. And he said, how would I feel if it was my son who met a controversial group and dropped out of college and disappeared from your life? And the force of his tears made me step into his shoes and imagine that I would feel pretty bad and worried for my son. So I agreed to talk to the deprogrammers, the ex-Moonies that he had arranged, one of whom I had recruited into the cult, Gladys Rodriguez at the time. She went on to become a social worker, and another one of my deprogrammers, Nestor Garcia, went on to become a psychiatrist, I might add. But the key point is that it was in that deprogramming that they exposed me to Lifton's work and showed me, and I have a copy of the book. I don't know how it will come out on this virtual screen, not at all, so I'm not even going to bother. But it's called Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. It came out in '61, and we went through the 8 criteria. And by the end, I was confused because I believed the Moonies was God's people and the commies were Satan's people, and the Moonies were doing the same thing as Satan's people. And that led to my realization the following day that Moon was a liar. And if he was a liar, then he couldn't be the Messiah. He couldn't be sinless. He was not trustworthy. And I described the experience as a snapping moment where it felt like my entire reality came tumbling down. I described the feeling like being in a dark room and someone opens the blinds and the sun comes shining through, waking up. And it was Lifton's book that I read. It was very hard for me to read. I needed a dictionary to read it. And I had been an English major. I was reading 2 to 3 books a week before the Moonies. But my brain atrophied during those 2.5 years. Anyway, I read his book over and over again, but what Lifton was describing about the 50s and Mao, the Moonies had a far more sophisticated program. When I was recruited, there was a 3-day, 7-day, 21-day, 40-day, 120-day workshop. It was very systematized. And I decided to reach out to Dr. Lifton. I tracked him down. He was teaching at Yale. I talked with his secretary and said I really would like to talk to Dr. Lifton because his book saved my life. And when he got on the phone, I told him that his book saved my life. And he said, which book? And I said, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. And his comment was, that old book? Why? And then I talked about the Moonies and dropping out of college and how I became a leader. And he said, come and see me. So there I was a college dropout. I was ashamed, embarrassed, confused. I had a cast on my right leg from my toes to my groin, walking around on crutches, living back with my parents, not knowing what I was going to do with my life and how I was going to proceed. And he invited me to his penthouse apartment in Central Park West. And I'll never forget that experience because I'm sitting on his couch with my leg up on a cushioned thing, looking at him and this wall of hard-covered books from the floor to the ceiling. And his hair was kind of like wispy, Einsteinian is how I remember it. And I proceeded to tell him about the Moonies and how I got recruited and what we did to recruit and indoctrinate people. And he said, you know, Steve, I just know this secondhand because I've interviewed people, but you've lived it. You know, they did it to you and you did it to other people. And what you're describing is so much more sophisticated than what the Chinese were doing in the 50s. You need to go study psychology and explain it to people like me. And I was sitting there, I'll never forget it. I was like, this Yale psychiatrist who wrote the book on Chinese communist brainwashing wants me to study psychology and explain what happened to him. And I was like, I can do that. So it was life changing. And later on, I became a therapist, and I describe that moment as a brilliant, what's known as a therapeutic reframe of my cult experience. In other words, let's make lemonade out of the lemons, and let's use my traumatic experience, including almost dying and almost being murdered a couple of times when I was a cult member from dangerous situations. Um, and I never imagined that I would spend my life doing this work. It's 49 years later. 5 books, 4 TEDx talks. I've lectured and done workshops all over the world. I have a CME course for psychiatrists and CEs for psychologists, social workers to teach this specialty population, which is affecting tens of millions of Americans, if and really more than 1 billion people worldwide. And I realized way back in the 70s that if I decided I wanted to become an expert on the mind and psychology and social psychology, that no matter what I did, it would be helpful for my own self-development, but it would also be useful for whatever else I wanted to do with my life. And so I said to Lifton, I want to go back to college. My brain isn't working yet. Can I go in a year and study with you? So and so he said sure. And so I went to Yale in the summer of '77, and I hated Yale. I took 3 classes. I got 2 A's and a B, but I was not accepted to matriculate based on my creative writing background from Queens College. But I really didn't like it there at all at Yale and New Haven. And my friend, who was an ex-Scientologist who was going to Boston University, said, come to Boston. It's great. And so I transferred and went to Boston University. But back to Lifton, all I can say is I've read every one of his books, and there were so many important insights he had into human nature. And I really, really, really want to encourage you to look at the first interview he granted me. This was back when his memoir, Witness to an Extreme Century, came out. I believe it was 2011. Because at the beginning of the interview, I spliced in a video I made of my bookcase at the time, and I have many more books of his, reviewing some of his most important works. And just listen to the interview because I asked him about a lot of those books. And all I can say is I helped so many people get out of cults using Lifton's chapter 22. And I went on to develop the BITE model using cognitive dissonance theory and Leon Festinger, etc., behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. But I stayed in touch with Lifton, and Lifton got more and more interested in cults. And I have to say, way back in the 70s, it was really more Margaret Singer who was at the forefront of being willing to speak publicly against cults, and Lifton was kind of shy. And I think he was honestly a bit timid because he didn't want to get harassed or threatened, where Margaret was a warrior. and did expert witness and other things. But I can go on and on about my learnings with Robert Lifton, but I'm proud to say that I got to spend time with him. I got to know him better. And when I reached out to him, I think my last interview was last September of 2024, just before the election. And he agreed to do another interview with me after the election. And I reached out to him when Donald Trump ascended to the office. And unfortunately, he wasn't well enough at that point to grant an interview, which saddened me greatly. And I lost Philip Zimbardo last year, another person who was monumentally important in my professional development. So, yes, I am ready. Thank you, Cami. I have so much to say. Mitch, Kale, oh my God, I'm so sorry for your mentor passing away. I'm so saddened today. I left your last interview with him on serial lying. I know. Yeah, he was working. He kept working. He was amazingly prolific. And I got the last few interviews were out on the Cape. That first interview was at his home in Cambridge, and you know, he was 99 years old, and my goodness, we can all aspire to be as prolific and to contribute so many original ideas that have real weight to them. And if you watch that initial interview where I go over his initial works with everything from the psychological effects on the nuclear bomb on the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, death and life, to his work with Vietnam vets and their trauma, to Nazi doctors. He did a book on apocalyptic cults destroying the world to save it, which is worth reading. He did and that was a book about the Japanese sarin gas cult, a group I know very well from my own professional experience. And 60 Minutes flew me to Japan when that last attack happened. And he did a book on Trump called Losing Reality. I should also add this Monday, we'll be sharing my latest interview with Dr. Bandy Lee, who edited the dangerous case of Donald Trump and the more dangerous case of Donald Trump and the most dangerous case of Donald Trump. And Lifton was one of the original experts weighing in on just how dangerous Donald Trump was. And if you are familiar with that book and maybe read it when it came out years ago, look up what he wrote about Trump and talked about Trump as a guru figure. And we'll put a link in the chat to the book. So he was concerned about nuclear bombs. He was concerned about dissociation. He wrote a very important book about the protean man, and I should add protean woman, that talked about how people can adapt to different social environments. Let's see, Walter Lippmann. Yeah, Walter Lippmann. Oh, you're going to buy his books. I don't know which book to buy. So for me, I recommend reading his first seminal book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. And you know, follow your passion. But there's so many different topics. And you might enjoy listening to me interviewing him in his original words first, and then pick and choose. He introduced me to the concept of psychohistory, the idea that when we're looking at historical figures, we should understand their psychology in terms of the historical moment in which they lived, which was a new concept for me back in the 70s and 80s. Focus Lady on YouTube. It's a great tribute to honor Dr. Robert Lifton today. Thanks so much for the educational opportunity in his memory. I've been encouraging his family to do a website and put up as many of his recorded interviews and lectures as possible. I know I have video archives of lectures he's given since the 70s and 80s, and it's on my list of things to do to digitize some of these things. And if I can have permission to share them, I will. But really, what we really want to understand, this was a man who loved life, and he was so creative. And if you haven't checked out his birds book, he had these little pencil drawings of birds, but the conversations were very philosophical, very thought provoking. Oh, and thank you, Cami. You're putting up a link to my YouTube videos with Dr. Lifton. And honestly, I wanted to just talk for a minute because the New York Times obituary is really worth reading. But I want to also say that it was a travesty of F. Lee Bailey that Patty Hearst got convicted a bank robbery when she was physically abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army the same frickin' month that I got recruited into the Moonies. I was sucked into the Moonies, and she was physically abducted, thrown into a trunk, put into a closet, raped, and made into Tanya. Anyway, Lifton, Singer, West were all expert witnesses, and it really was a horrible result that F. Lee Bailey decided that the jury wasn't quote, buying the brainwashing defense. And so he didn't argue it properly. And we're still behind the at least 50 years, but I say 100 years in the legal system. And guess what? All authoritarian cults, including Xi and Putin and Trump and the Moonies and Scientology and Opus Dei and destructive New Apostolic Reformation churches, and I could go on and on. They don't want the public to understand brainwashing is a real phenomenon. It's documented. Jim Jones proved the impermissible social psychology experiment. Can you get parents to put cyanide-laced flavor aid in your children's mouths and kill them if you're ordered to? They did. And so my passion is to update the law, which is why I'm running the latest version of a survey at bitemodel.com, free, anonymous, and we're testing a 20-question model as well as a revised 40-question model. And it will give you a number on the influence continuum of how healthy or how authoritarian the relationship or group that you're in is. And by telling us the name of your group and filling it out, you'll get valuable feedback for yourself, and no one will know what that is. And we are asking for feedback to improve it. And we're inviting people to email us if they want to reveal what their name is and what their number was, and if they want to fill out a bite model publicly, for our database on their group. Because my company's called Freedom of Mind Resource Center, and I want to be a resource. And all authoritarian cults don't want people to have a trustworthy, reliable, scholarly resource to reality test. And that's my life work. And I hope more and more ex-members will learn from me and my peers and share their stories, and we can start a more monumental reaching out to people who were former believers in Trump and welcome them, because we need to have a vast coalition to have any hope for America to have a future that is rules based and rule of law and separation of church and state, and to stop this authoritarian assault. Any other questions or comments coming in? Let's see. I have one on YouTube. I've read Thought Reform and Destroying the World to Save It by Dr. Lifton at your recommendation. It's excellent. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, I just yeah, it's so I really I want we're recording this because I want to share it with Dr. Lifton's children, his grandchildren, and I want people to know him. I don't want him to disappear from the public's consciousness. That here is a man who he was an Air Force psychiatrist studying brainwashing in China. And Edgar Schein was another. He was an army psychologist. He wrote a great book called Coercive Persuasion that a lot of people haven't read. And Margaret Singer went on to write a book, Cults in Our Midst, and she created a model, a six-condition model. So I've been trying to stand on the shoulders of these giants and do what I can to inspire and encourage more people to move forward in their lives and use their experience for the public good. Taz Seti visiting Terra on Substack, keep his memory and teachings alive. I will, and I will ask my people to try to dig up the old lectures and videos of his, and if anybody has any copies and saw him live and has videos and photos of him, please share them on your social media. If you got a chance to meet him in person or learn from him. I think, in my recollection, I was the second former cult member to meet with Dr. Lifton. There was a woman named Margaret whose family approached him first. She had been in a Bible cult, and then I reached out and said, Dr. Lifton, your book saved your life. And so this has been a evolution, and I want better models than the bite model to be evolved. I want everyone to understand trafficking. In fact, that's what my dissertation is based on. Trafficking is illegal internationally: fraud, force, or coercion. And the Epstein victims speaking out on Wednesday at the Capitol, their voices need to be heard. And labor trafficking experts and sex trafficking experts have all used my bite model because it explains fraud, force, or coercion in detail. Control sleep, control clothing, change their name, change their language, put phobias in their mind, go on and on. Let's see, Audio Philemon on YouTube. Very sorry for your profound loss. Thank you for sharing. If there's a way to get information to the MAGAs that do not seek out in education and are ignorant to it, I really believe a warm, respectful, warm, friendly, connecting with common ground. And if you've been in a cult, share your experiences. Not try to persuade them with facts or logic or do a persuasion frame. Do a sharing. We're all in this crazy life together. And I'm curious, what do you think about the latest thing about the Epstein files? What do you think about Trump threatening the GOP that it will be a hostile act if they ask for the files to be released when he promised to release the files? You know, meet people where they are. And if you know people who are family and friends and knew them before they got into MAGA and you saw them radically change, remind them of who they were before and just warmly ask them, what are you thinking now? And if you knew then what you know now, would you have voted for Trump? I know when I ask Hispanics who voted for Trump, knowing what he's doing now to Hispanics, would you have voted for him? Oh, no, not at all. So and just like, yeah, it's a human experience to change your mind when you have new information. This is the human experience. Let's not shame people. Let's not call them names. Let's welcome them. Let's make a huge anti-Trump tent. That's what Trump fears the most, and that's why he's rolling out military into democratic cities to try to make people fearful and to distract people. And let's understand, he fawned to Putin, a war criminal. Guess why? Because it's factually documented that Russia recruited Donald Trump in the 80s. And I'm still amazed that I meet pundits who still are not convinced by the facts. Read Craig Unger's book, listen to Yuri Shvets, former KGB official. Use your common sense. When he went to Helsinki and said he believed Putin over the CIA and Homeland Security, wasn't that a clue? When Trump fired Comey and there was a celebration in the Oval Office only for Russian media, wasn't that a clue? Think analytically, and it's hard when you put someone on a pedestal or they put themselves on a pedestal and you believe them. And that's what helped me get out of the Moonies, realizing Moon was untrustworthy and he was a liar. I had been told directly by him to lie to members and to the public over and over again. It didn't click until that deprogramming moment. Let's see, Timothy Squire on YouTube. When you teach someone to think for themselves, you give them the gift of tomorrow. What a beautiful statement. I love that. You give them the ability to take back their personal power. We say it's your mind and only you should control it. And frankly, when it comes to social media, you have to understand this is not normal environment for human beings, and very powerful billionaires are manipulating minds. And we need trustworthy experts and scholars and science to navigate reality. And if you're a parent or a grandparent, don't be silent. Don't lose hope. Get involved. And it's very satisfying and very fulfilling to build community against Donald Trump and against this fascist authoritarian takeover. I'm committed to speaking out. Vivian loves to create on YouTube. So sorry to hear when Dr. Lifton died. What an extraordinary person whose expertise greatly benefited the world. It's a travesty. His 10 years of warnings on Trump was not. Yeah, it is a travesty. And Bandy Lee was censored because of Big Pharma's pressure on the American Psychiatric Association, as you'll hear in next week's podcast and read in my Substack. I've been censored. I used to be on TV all the time, literally. I mean, every show I was on all the time whenever there was a cult story. Then the cult of Trump came out, and all of a sudden the deep freeze happens. And again, I'm telling you, I've written a book about authoritarian mind control and all the cults that are influencing Donald Trump and bringing their millions of followers. And they don't want the public to get educated, because if people understand this, they can't be manipulated anymore. That's the key, is having a correct diagnosis for a disease. And mind control is best thought of as a virus. And I interviewed Sander van der Linden, who talked about it being a virus and created a game even to teach people about conspiracy theories, to help inoculate them to conspiracy theories. Check out my Substack. Please consider $5 a month subscription. It will help me have a louder voice. If you know big influencers, ask them to have me on their show. Um, we need to get this knowledge about psychology of undue influence out to a much broader audience, and nobody has more clout, honestly, than former members saying it happened to me. I was raised in the Mormons. I was raised in the Jehovah's Witnesses. I was raised in Scientology, and listen to their stories. Seriously, this is a real phenomenon, and we can either go where the authoritarians want, which is to ignorance and being self-censoring, or we can speak louder and be public. Oh, and last night I heard that Indivisible is going to do a No King's Day 2, October 18th, which is more than a month away, so plenty of time to plan. Honestly, I think people should be protesting daily if they can. And my problem with Indivisible, if I can, if somebody's in hierarchy of Indivisible listening, it's a top-down organization, and what we need is a bottoms-up movement. We need to listen to the people, and we need to organize locally. And yes, there's some value to direction from the top down, but this is not a normal political moment, and we're dealing with undue influence through the control of media at an unprecedented level with the use of AI now and social media. This is it, people. It's our lives, it's our future. And let's demonstrate that we're not going to roll over as the Russian people have been trained to do for centuries when Putin decided to do a false flag and bomb his own people and blame it on the Chechens to assume power. I'm concerned Trump's going to try the same Putin play and kill Americans and blame it on the lefties and declare martial law. If we understand the playbook, we ain't going to fall for it. We need to out it. And I think Trump is failing, and Thiel and Musk and Zuckerberg all want Vance because he'll be a good little lapdog. He'll say what he's told to say, and he won't deviate. The question is, will people who voted for Trump blindly follow Vance? I have a big question mark about that. And we should be thinking a lot more about messaging against Vance and against the billionaires who want a network state. And check out my interview with Greg Epstein and his fine MIT Press book, Tech Agnostic. So I think I'm going to begin to wrap up this memorial to my mentor, Robert J. Lifton, died at 99 years of age yesterday. Read his obituary, learn from this man, and understand that thought reform, brainwashing, mind control is real. And for all those folks who believe in the apocalypse, you might want to read Destroying the World to Save It, his book on apocalyptic cultism. And I want to encourage people to focus on planetary survival and living life as a human being in human bodies, like not becoming androids. Like, let's enjoy life. Let's celebrate music and dance and arts, and let's use creativity and not rely on AI for creativity. No, let's be us. Let's elevate the human species. So I want to thank Cami. I want to thank Spike. I want to thank my team for jumping on this because it was a last minute thing, and I hope this excites you to learn more about Robert Lifton's work and to understand that we're living at an existential moment, and we should make the most of it. Oh, and I need to just say, my last time when I was with Dr. Lifton on the Cape, he was talking about how important it was for him to turn off from all of the terrible traumatic material and have fun. And he said he loved baseball and he was an avid fan and he loved music and good food and that's how to live life is be grateful, enjoy, find a good company, good partners, good friends, and support each other. So thank you, Laura. Robert Lifton was a wonderful human being, as an expert, as a scholar. We miss you, Dr. Lifton. Thank you for your contributions. And I intend to do everything in my power that people will remember you. Take care, everybody. I'm signing off now. Bye.